Well, here's something you won't see on Western media. Ukrainian mothers taking to the streets of the capital, protesting their president Zelensky, chanting, "Shame on you." And before the war, Zelensky vowed to do everything in his power to negotiate with Russia. But of course, the strong hand of NATO is very strong, will stop at nothing to get its proxy war. Now moms watch as Ukrainian military grabbing young men off the streets, sending them to the meat grinder on the front lines. This young man grabbed right out of a university class in Ukraine. And the soldier then turns to the camera after they grab this guy and they tells the camera guy, "You're next." So I wonder why these moms are pissed. Former CIA analyst Larry Johnson has been calling BS on the Western media's fake news narrative about Ukraine winning this thing. He's written a series of devastating articles over the past few months showing just how bad things have been going for Ukraine. And he joins me now. Larry, good to see you again. Welcome back to the show. It seems that there's been this narrative over the past couple of weeks, at least in the Western media, that well, Ukraine is not ready for this spring or summer offensive. They're hurt. They don't have the weapons. They don't have the ammunition. And at first blush, when I first saw this sort of narrative starting to emerge, the first thing that I felt in my gut was this is a disinformation campaign. Like before a war happens, before D-Day happens, you start peppering everyone with fake news, fake information. Is that what's going on here, or am I just so cynical that that's how my brain thinks these days?
You haven't lost your mind, but it is, I guess, a natural response to just watching the craziness that's been going on in the West. We've just seen in the last month a complete opposite 180-degree turn of events from Lloyd Austin saying the Russians are losing and losing badly to the general in the European command that's in charge of the oil operation saying, no, the Russians haven't been degraded. Now, I think General Cavoli, who made that latter statement, was correct. But you're dealing with, in the United States, a delusional society coupled with not following any kind of standard military doctrine. And what do I mean by that? They keep announcing this counteroffensive like it's a Disney blockbuster that's going to open in July, coming soon to a theater near you and get everybody to, come see it. Well, during World War II, on the eve of the invasion of Normandy, yes, the United States and the Brits went through a grand deception operation, several of them, in using General Patton to create a fake army. That's one thing. That's not what they're doing. This is the equivalent of Eisenhower saying, hey, we're going to launch an attack in June, and we're going to land in Normandy, so be ready, here we come. And yet, at the same time, not having taken the necessary preparations to have trained troops and all the equipment they need. So it's insane.
Well, and then you had this Sunday, this Times article in the Sunday Times in the UK, with this headline: Ukraine isn't ready for its big offensive, but it has no choice. And I've been thinking a lot about this article since I read it on Sunday, and I've been just walking around with the dog thinking about that. And it really hits on a point, which is Ukraine doesn't have the personnel, to my mind. They don't have the weapons. They don't have the bullets. They keep running out of ammo. Things are not arriving quickly enough. But they have to, for almost like political PR reasons, it seems, they have to do something, right? Is that kind of what this is getting at?
Yeah, the West is treating this like it's an investment. We've put all this money in, therefore we expect. But notice the difference. Russia started its mobilization last September, called up an additional 250 troops. So in that entire time, those troops have been trained. They've been going through training. And Ukraine doesn't have that. They are literally grabbing people off the street, maybe giving them, putting them in a uniform. Some get 2, maybe 3 weeks training, and then all of a sudden they're shoved to the front lines and they become cannon fodder. So for this offensive to be carried off with any kind of effect, they're going to have people who know how to not only drive and operate tanks, but to operate those tanks in conjunction with other people in a unit. They simply have not had the time to carry out that kind of training. Plus, they're ignoring the fact that Russia's not been sitting back playing poker and drinking vodka. they've been building defensive positions. They've been salting the earth with mines, landmines. Then they have their own artillery. They have fixed-wing aircraft. Along that 1,000-mile front or the 1,000-kilometer front, yes, could the Ukrainians find a potential weak spot that the Russians aren't guarding right now or have forces deployed? Sure. And they could break through that temporarily. But Russia has the advantage of being able to respond to that and to crush anything the Ukrainians are going to throw. It's a suicide mission.
You have been on your website since the beginning of this war, cataloging the decline of the Ukrainian army. You've been really highlighting and diving deep into the numbers, because there's been so much propaganda and fake information about the number of casualties, the number of people on the Ukrainian side, the Russian side who've been killed or are casualties in this war. And we learned, I think about a week ago or so, why we never saw this Ukrainian offensive back in November. And according to RT, it came down to personnel. And we've seen then, of course, these videos that I just showed you one here, of course, as you mentioned, these conscriptions where these guys are pulling people off the streets, going to the universities, trying to grab as many men as they can to throw them into the meat grinder. So since November, since we didn't see that offensive in November, have they been able to build up their ranks? Or is it just more of the same? I'm curious, with you diving into all of these numbers on a regular basis, what do you think? What do you see? What are your sources telling you about how big Ukraine's army is now for any kind of offensive?
They are akin to somebody trying to bail water out of a boat that has holes in the bottom. So the more the water, they keep pouring the water out, but water keeps flowing in. So what do I mean by that? Yes, they go out, they're dragooning people, forcing them into service, but then people are being killed on the front lines, and not just the new recruits, officers, some of the experienced people. They've been suffering great losses, both killed and wounded. And as a result, that is a detrition. It's a math problem, Clayton, because the Russians are firing 7 to 8 times the number of shells. And I liken it to, I'll give you a gun, you've got one bullet, I'm going to bring 7 other people with me, and we're each going to have a bullet. We're going to shoot at you. Now, you might kill one of us, but you're going to get killed. And so that's why the Ukrainians have suffered higher casualties. They keep trying to claim it's the Russians, but again, in their magical thinking, they can somehow fire far fewer shells and kill far more Russians than it is the opposite effect. So plus, there's not any secure training bases in Western Ukraine. The Russians have demonstrated they can reach out and hit military installations of the Ukrainians and actually of NATO personnel as well. So they've got a limited number. They don't have unlimited numbers, and it's a war of attrition. And again, when all is said and done, Russia has 140, 150 million people. Ukraine has 20 million. They can fight, if they each keep losing in the same proportion, Ukraine runs out of people much sooner than Russia.
I'm curious what's next. Obviously, from having been in the CIA, the back channel communications, what's happening here. Now we see moms on the streets protesting against the president, President Zelensky. We know reports are that the United States intelligence community was, even before the war, speaking with Zelensky about what was to come, about what was unfolding. And so in the early months, there appeared to be peace talks. There was discussions, right? They were, of course, what was happening in Turkey. And then the United States and the UK stick their necks into this and stop any kind of peace talks. What is next for Ukraine? I mean, obviously, it seems like Russia is gearing up for a total domination here in the next few weeks, softening up targets over the past 48 hours, missile strikes and so forth, ahead of any kind of offensive. What happens to Zelensky? What sort of back channel communications might the intelligence community be doing right now to, get him out of there, save face? What might they be doing right now?
I think the possibility of a negotiated settlement is remote. I frankly don't see how Putin could do that and survive politically in Russia, given the atrocities that have been committed, not just against Russian soldiers, but against the people in the Donbass that are now considered part of Russia. That coupled with the activities that have been carried out in terms of direct provocations of Russia. I think a year ago, Russia may have been willing to say, okay, we can find a negotiated settlement. Now they recognize there is no basis of trust. Negotiations require you've got to have some trust in the other side. I don't see where that foundation exists. And as a result, I think the Russian military leadership recognizes they're going to have to take out the political leadership in Kiev and install a government that will be sympathetic to Russia, that will be something that Russia can control. Because remember, this is not just an attack on the Russian military. They're trying to erase and eradicate all things Russian, the language, the church, art, literature. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Larry Johnson, we appreciate your writings and your thinking on this since the beginning of this war. And thank you so much for taking time out to talk with us on this fall offensive, this spring offensive, this summer offensive. We'll see if it heads into a Christmas offensive. Larry, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Clayton.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.